Hey guys, my name's Steve. I live in Sydney. I serve the Baptist churches of New South Wales and ACT when it comes to their work with young people. I've been following Jesus now for just over 20 years, and it's a real privilege to be able to be with you as part of Easter camp in 2020, albeit very differently when it comes to video engagement and not able to be present with one another in the physical sense. Hey, it's Easter Saturday. It's Easter Saturday, and it's a bit of an odd day, right? Because as you think about it, our media today, even if they don't pay too much attention to the particulars, they know that Good Friday is a significant religious day. Even if people don't believe in Jesus or believe what happened to Jesus or don't see the significance of it, Good Friday is a day where shops are shut and the world kind of pauses for a moment, even if it doesn't understand why. And we know that in churches in particular, that Resurrection Sunday, Easter Sunday, is a time of much celebration, much joy, much triumph, much hope as we see the crucified Christ risen back to life. So what's with Easter Saturday? What do we do on a day like today? I don't know about you, but often Easter Saturday can be that place where you sleep in. It can be that time where you relax, where you forget about the things that you're supposed to be doing, where you kick back with friends, where you binge watch whatever is available to you, YouTube or Netflix. But that wouldn't have been the case on the first Easter Saturday. It's an odd part of the story, right? There's a lot written about what happened on Good Friday and the lead up to Good Friday, and a lot written about what happened as Jesus was risen back to life. But what about Easter Saturday? What about the middle of the story? What about the emotions that are wrapped up in that day? What about what happened to the first participants of Easter Saturday? Hey, they've just seen this man, Jesus, crucified. They've seen him up on a cross, standing next to two criminals. They heard him cry out. They saw the sky change colour. They saw the anguish. And now what? You know, for each of us, when there is times of grief, of loss, of uncertainty, we all react in different ways. We react because we're no longer certain. Our world gets rocked a little bit, and therefore we get to ask some bigger questions about why we believe what we believe and how our circumstances are then going to change the future that we had imagined and the expectations that we had around it. I wonder for those who were present on the first Easter Saturday, how much of this was happening for them. Because the biblical authors don't give too much attention to it, and yet for us, 2,000 plus years later, we sit on this day going, so what? What do we do? Because we know the end of the story, right? We know what tomorrow brings. We know the tragedy, the loss, the pain that occurred on Good Friday. And we know its significance when it comes to the forgiveness of sin, Jesus taking our place, our punishment, in order to make us right with our Creator God. We know that bit. And we know what happens tomorrow. We know what happens tomorrow. We know that the story isn't finished yet. We know that Jesus rises from the grave. We know the triumph and the life and the hope that brings. But those on the first Easter would not have. For those who participated, lived the first Easter, their response, I think, would have been one of grief, of loss, of uncertainty. Hey, the other day I watched rewatched, I should say, that moment in Australian sporting history where the Socceroos re-qualified for the World Cup. When John Aloisi put that ball into the back of the net after extra time playing Uruguay. But I know that watching it for the second or third or 10th time that I've seen that clip, that my engagement is very different because I know the outcome. And so for Christians on Easter Saturday, it can be a little bit confusing what we do on this day. We're just waiting, aren't we? Well, again, that's not what would have happened for those who participated and lived the first Easter. I'm rewatching the Hunger Games at the moment. I enjoyed it the first time. I'll watch it again. But I know that my response to what I see in the lives of those on the screen is very different the second time through. I know what's going to happen to individuals. I know what happens to families. I know the end of the story. And so I can respond with much less depth, much less concern than the first time I saw it. And so for Christians, I think we have a parallel here when it comes to the uncertainty that we hear about, touched on by the biblical authors on the first Easter Saturday. Hey, uncertainty brings about all kinds of responses. For some, it's life as normal. Not much changes. It's like, oh, I'll keep going. For others, it can be about pondering for a moment and then getting on with life. Maybe for others, it's some small changes. Maybe it's some radical changes. Hey, think through what the coronavirus has done for us. When we first heard about it, there were people who rushed off to the supermarket and stocked up on toilet paper. If we've moved on from toilet paper, then it was like tinned food and rice and all those kind of things. And then it was hand sanitizer. Some people just went nuts for it, right? Maybe your parents did. Maybe you did. I don't know. But some people went nuts. Other people were like, maybe I'll just throw one extra one of those in because I don't know what's going to happen next. Maybe I'll make a special trip because I don't really need anything, but just to be certain, I should probably, for each of us, our response to uncertainty is going to be a little bit different. And our response to particular uncertain situations is going to result in quite a variety of responses. But if you pick up the scriptures and you look at what Luke records for us in chapter 23, start at verse 50 and follow it through there, we're introduced to a man called Joseph of Arimathea. So Luke 23, verse 50 and following, Joseph of Arimathea. We know that Joseph was a wealthy man. We know that Joseph disagreed with the actions of Pilate. We know that he approaches Pilate and asks for Jesus' body so that he might be able to honor this man, and he takes him to a tomb. And there's a preparation that takes place there. There's some women that are mentioned there as part of the story at this point as well. They're going to, again, honor this individual, this Jesus. And yet, for us, as we read the story, what often gets skipped over, what often gets missed, is the sense of grief, of loss, the uncertainty that occupies these individuals. Hey, I don't want to suggest to you that these people that the biblical authors make mention of understood completely who Jesus was. I'm not suggesting to you that at all. That at all. But what I am mentioning here is that these individuals, they lost somebody. Even if they didn't know Jesus too well, they knew of Jesus. They saw what had happened to Jesus. There was loss there. So there was a sense of grief and definitely an uncertainty. What happens now? Does life go on as it were? Or does this change things consequently forever? We get to pause for a moment and consider this story. Because at one level, Joseph sees what takes place and continues a course of action that he would have done with the death of anybody. But that doesn't give credit to Joseph's understanding of who Jesus was. And the same with these women. To some extent, they continue on with their activity just as though they would have with anybody. And yet again, that doesn't give credit to what was happening for these women, why they wanted to honor and mourn and grieve the death of this man, Jesus, in this way. You know what? Psychologists give us some helpful tools sometimes when it comes to our grief, our loss and uncertainty. And you might have seen or heard this before, but here are 5 things that I wonder are helpful for us as we consider the moment where we find ourselves in the gospel story this Easter. this grief, this loss, this uncertain time. Yes, for those who were there the first Easter, but consequently for Christians as they have considered, well, God, what now? God, what now? These are often referred to as the 5 stages of grief. And so I'll just run through them, and I'll ask you a question later on about which of these you identify with most strongly at this point in time, whether it be about Jesus or whether it be in your own life right now. But the 5 stages of grief, you might have seen this at some other point in time, but the first one is just denial. Never happened. This could not be happening to me right now. Think about your own life, the moments where you're like, hold on a minute, hold on, something chaotic's occurred, something a little left field, something strange has taken place, something that's kind of rocked you. The first response psychologists would suggest to you is denial. Deny. We see it with the coronavirus, right? And politicians who came out weeks ago now and said, no, it's not real, it's just the flu. Don't worry, it's not a thing. So the first response is denial when it comes to grief. And I wonder if those who participated in the first Easter Saturday were experiencing some sense of denial. Denial in terms of the loss of Jesus. This man executed. Now what? The second one is anger. I can't believe this has happened. This is ridiculous. Do you have any clue of what this is going to mean for me? So the second response psychologists identify when it comes to our grief can be anger. They don't often put a marker on how long this can take, but the first one is about denial. Didn't happen. The second one is this can't be happening. I'm angry. I'm furious that this has taken place. And my guess is that there would have been some level of that had occurred at the first Easter for anybody who had witnessed what happened to Jesus. The third one is bargaining. So denial and then anger and then bargaining. Hey, I'll do you a deal. Like there's this terrible situation. I'm going to do a deal with you. And hey, in the coronavirus land, maybe it's about people who want, I'll do you a deal. I'll take one of your kind of packets of loo paper and you can have some of my spaghetti or, tinned tomatoes or whatever we're going to need. I'll do a bit of an exchange for you. This is trying to reverse what took place, or at least trying to cope with it by bargaining your way around it. So the first one being denial, the second one being anger, the third one that of bargaining. The fourth one can be what's labeled as depression. So this is the sense of overwhelming grief, overwhelming sorrow when it comes to the loss that has taken place. And surely we see this in the scriptures. We see this in the response of those who were present that first Easter Saturday. Depression. The final one is referred to by psychologists as acceptance. So if you go through those in order, we're talking about denial and anger, pushing into a sense of bargaining or wanting to make changes to the circumstance, bargaining, followed by depression and then acceptance. The realization that, okay, this did take place. It has impacted me. I didn't want it to occur, but it changes. It changes me, it changes others, it changes the future. Acceptance. I'm not sure right now what grief, what sorrow, what uncertainty you're facing. And I know it's appropriate, and I've referenced it a couple of times, just that the whole kind of pandemic that we're living in. And so maybe for you, that's the place of uncertainty, where you're like, God, are you aware of what's going on? Do you get it? Like, what? Surely, if you were real, like, surely, if you have this almighty power, let alone knowledge, you wouldn't want this. Maybe for you right now, the uncertainty is specific to the pandemic that we're in. Not knowing what the future's going to hold. Not knowing how this impacts you, how it impacts others, how it impacts our world. Maybe that's the uncertainty that you face this Easter. If it's not uncertainty around the pandemic, maybe for you it's some level of uncertainty irrespective of where we find ourselves in human history right now, just some level of uncertainty when it comes to your friendships. Do they like you? Do they actually want to spend time with you, even if it's on a screen? Is there this level of connection? Maybe it's about friendships. There's some uncertainty that's sitting there that's really bothering you. It's distracting you. It causes you to lay awake at night, or it causes you to act in a particular way that you know does not align with who you want to be, or more particularly who God wants you to be. Maybe the uncertainty that you face this Easter is all around your friendships. Or perhaps it's about family. Maybe it's a grandparent or a great-grandparent, somebody who is frail, somebody who you know is coming towards the end of their life. Maybe there's a real uncertainty about where they stand before God, or the depth of connection that you have with them. Or maybe it's not that far away. Maybe it's actually about your parents and some kind of uncertainty that faces what happens in your home. I'm not sure of the uncertainty that you face. But this Easter, can I encourage you to ask some different questions of God? Ask some different questions of God before you get to the hope and the life that Easter Sunday has in store. So some questions for you to reflect upon this Easter, and the Saturday of this Easter in particular. Hey, firstly, I want to ask you the question of what sense of uncertainty that you're facing. Again, it might be one of those that I've just named. Maybe it's another one. I don't know. What uncertainty are you facing right now? The second question I want you to be asking of yourself and inclusive of others is that question about the 5 stages of grief. Which one of those you're identifying with at the moment, and whether that's because of what you're facing in life, or whether it's as you consider what we read in the scriptures on Easter Saturday, in terms of the response of Joseph of Arimathea, of the women, in terms of preparing Jesus' body post Good Friday. The third question I want you to ask is what might have been going on for those who were navigating the first Easter Saturday, after Jesus' death. What kind of things might they have been feeling? What kind of things might they have been thinking? What kind of things would have changed about their activity because of what they've just witnessed? And lastly, I want you to be asking a question about, so God, what now? God, what now? What do you want to teach me now? What is it that you're trying to say to me now? What is it that I need to learn now? What is it that you want to reveal to me as we live in uncertain times? As you continue to shape me into the woman or man you've created me to be, what are the things that I need to be asking of you on this Easter Saturday? Hey, don't forget about what happened yesterday, but don't rush too quickly about what's going to happen tomorrow. Bless you guys. Real privilege to be part of what's happening this Easter at Easter Camp. And I look forward to hearing some stories about what it is that God has spoken into your life, and then consequently what he wants to do through your life as you go forward. Cheers.